In this episode, we move into a topic that helps explain why good security management is never just about building controls and hoping the organization adjusts around them. A security program can be technically impressive and still fail if it does not support the way the business actually works from day to day. That is why alignment matters so much for someone studying Certified Information Security Manager, CISM, because the role is not simply to protect systems in isolation. It is to help the organization pursue its goals in a way that is safer, more resilient, and more sustainable over time. When security is aligned with operational business objectives, it becomes part of how work gets done rather than a separate force that only appears to slow things down. For a brand new learner, this topic is really about understanding that security management is strongest when it protects what matters most to the business, while still respecting how the business delivers services, serves customers, supports employees, and meets day-to-day expectations. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A useful place to begin is by defining what a security program and operational business objectives actually mean in practice. A security program is the organized collection of policies, processes, roles, controls, oversight activities, and improvement efforts that an organization uses to manage information security risk. Operational business objectives are the practical goals that keep the organization functioning every day, such as maintaining availability, serving customers efficiently, controlling cost, meeting delivery targets, protecting quality, complying with obligations, and keeping critical processes running smoothly. These objectives are not abstract mission statements hanging on a wall. They are the real outcomes managers are expected to deliver through ongoing operations. When security leaders talk about alignment, they are talking about connecting the security program to those real outcomes so that protection supports performance instead of feeling disconnected from it. That connection is essential because organizations do not protect information for its own sake alone. They protect information, systems, and processes because those things help the business operate, earn trust, and achieve meaningful goals. One of the most common beginner misconceptions is the idea that security and operations naturally want opposite things. Security is often seen as the function that says no, while operations is seen as the function that wants speed, convenience, and continuity at any cost. There is some truth in the fact that these groups can experience tension, but it is a mistake to assume that their goals are fundamentally incompatible. Operations want stable systems, predictable service, fewer disruptions, and reliable outcomes. Security wants to reduce harmful events, control exposure, and strengthen resilience. Those aims often support one another more than people realize. A ransomware incident, a serious access failure, or a data exposure can damage operations just as much as it damages security posture. Alignment begins when both sides recognize that secure operations are usually stronger operations. The real challenge is not proving that security matters. The real challenge is designing security decisions in a way that supports the business objective while reducing risk in a proportionate and practical manner. For that reason, security leaders must understand the business well enough to know which operational objectives matter most and why. It is not enough to speak generally about protecting the organization. A manager needs to understand what processes generate revenue, which services customers depend on most, what systems are time-sensitive, where delays create serious business pain, and which parts of the organization would cause the most damage if disrupted. This understanding allows the security program to focus attention where business impact is greatest rather than spreading effort evenly across everything. A company that depends on online transactions may care deeply about availability and transaction integrity. A healthcare environment may place exceptional importance on patient safety, continuity of care, and privacy. A manufacturer may be highly sensitive to production interruption and operational downtime. Security alignment grows stronger when protection choices are informed by that business context, because the program can then support what the organization truly depends on rather than operating from generic assumptions about what should matter. This is why risk management sits at the center of alignment. Security cannot protect everything equally, and operations cannot tolerate every control with the same level of effort or disruption. Risk helps bridge that reality by giving the organization a way to decide where stronger protection is most needed and where trade-offs may be acceptable. When security leaders understand the likely impact of loss, disruption, misuse, or failure, they can recommend controls that make sense in relation to business importance. That means a critical operational process may deserve stronger monitoring, tighter change control, and more resilient backup arrangements than a lower-impact internal function. It also means some activities may reasonably accept more flexibility if the business benefit is high and the risk remains within acceptable bounds. Alignment is not about giving operations everything it wants, and it is not about security imposing the same answer everywhere. It is about using risk-informed judgment to match protective effort to business significance so that both security and operations are working from a shared understanding of priorities. A security program becomes more aligned when it is involved early enough to shape business and operational decisions before they harden into problems. If security enters the conversation only after a process has already been designed, a system has already been purchased, or a workflow has already become routine, it may look like an obstacle because it arrives late with new restrictions and concerns. When security is involved earlier, it can help identify requirements, highlight risks, and suggest reasonable safeguards before the operational model is locked in place. That early involvement often creates better outcomes because the organization can design with security in mind instead of adding it awkwardly later. It also changes the relationship between security and operations. Instead of being viewed as the team that appears at the end to demand changes, security becomes part of responsible planning and execution. For new learners, this is an important shift in thinking. Alignment is not just a reporting exercise or a statement of intent. It is something built through timing, participation, and thoughtful engagement throughout the life of business processes. Another major part of alignment is speaking in business terms rather than only security terms. Operational leaders are usually focused on throughput, service quality, uptime, customer experience, staffing, deadlines, and cost pressure. If security communicates only in the language of threats, vulnerabilities, and control frameworks, the message may be technically correct but still fail to connect. Strong security managers explain how a risk could interrupt service, reduce reliability, create rework, damage trust, or increase operating cost. They also explain how a proposed safeguard can support continuity, reduce avoidable disruption, improve accountability, or make recovery easier when something goes wrong. This does not mean security leaders should avoid technical truth. It means they should translate that truth into the language of consequence and operational value. When the conversation shifts from abstract protection to concrete business effect, operational stakeholders are more likely to see security as a partner in achieving their objectives rather than as a separate discipline competing for attention and resources. Alignment also depends on recognizing that controls must be workable in the real environment. A control that looks strong in theory may fail in practice if it slows essential work too much, creates confusing workarounds, or depends on unrealistic behavior from already pressured teams. This is one of the reasons mature security management pays attention to how processes function on the ground. If a control design ignores actual workflow, employees may bypass it, delay it, or quietly reshape it until it no longer delivers the intended protection. That does not mean the answer is to weaken controls whenever people complain. It means security leaders should understand the operating model well enough to choose safeguards that are realistic, understandable, and sustainable. A well-aligned control supports the business objective while still managing risk in a meaningful way. When people see that a safeguard respects how their work is done and why timing matters, adoption becomes more likely, resistance becomes more manageable, and the organization gains protection that lasts beyond the initial rollout. A practical example can make this easier to see. Imagine a business that depends on a customer support platform to resolve urgent service issues throughout the day. The operational business objective is fast, reliable support that keeps customers satisfied and prevents escalation. If the security program proposes a set of access and review controls without understanding the pace of support operations, it might create delays that frustrate both employees and customers. On the other hand, if security understands that responsiveness is essential It can recommend a design that still protects access, but does so in a way that preserves service continuity, accountability, and quick recovery when problems occur. The underlying principle is that security should shape the environment so the business can operate safely, not simply wrap the environment in rules that ignore operational needs. This example shows that alignment is not about choosing between security and performance. It is about designing a path where the organization can support both by treating risk reduction and business effectiveness as connected rather than opposing goals. Governance plays an important role because alignment does not happen through personal relationships alone. Relationships help, but they must be supported by clear decision-making structures, shared expectations, and consistent oversight. Governance helps define who approves risk-related trade-offs, who owns operational processes, who provides security guidance, and how disagreements are resolved when priorities collide. Without that structure, alignment can become inconsistent and dependent on personalities rather than repeatable management practice. One manager may cooperate closely with security while another ignores it, and the organization ends up with uneven protection across similar business activities. Good governance creates reliable ways for security and operational leaders to work together, escalate conflicts, and keep protection connected to business priorities. It also helps senior leadership see whether the security program is actually supporting operations in a disciplined manner or simply reacting issue by issue. For a beginner, this is a reminder that alignment is not purely cultural and not purely technical. It is also a governance matter that must be made visible in how decisions are made and reviewed. Metrics and reporting help the organization judge whether alignment is real or merely claimed. A security program can say it supports operational objectives, but leaders need evidence that this support is happening in practice. Useful information might show whether critical services remain stable, whether key control activities are occurring on time, whether high-impact issues are being resolved quickly enough, whether exceptions are growing, and whether security-related disruptions are decreasing or increasing over time. The most meaningful reporting connects protection to business outcomes rather than counting isolated activity. If a report only says how many checks were completed or how many alerts were reviewed, it may miss the bigger question of whether the security program is helping operations run more safely and predictably. Effective reporting allows leaders to ask whether controls are improving resilience, whether security investments are supporting important processes, and where tension between business objectives and control design still needs attention. That kind of visibility is essential because alignment must be monitored and adjusted, not assumed once it has been announced. It is also important to understand that operational business objectives change over time, which means alignment must be continuous rather than fixed. An organization may shift toward digital services, enter new markets, adopt new technologies, face different regulatory demands, or experience cost pressure that alters how work is prioritized. When business operations change, the security program must reassess what matters most, what new dependencies exist, and where older assumptions no longer fit. A program that was well aligned 2 years ago may become less effective if it continues protecting yesterday's priorities while the business has moved toward new processes and exposures. This is why security management requires ongoing dialogue with operational leaders and ongoing attention to business strategy as it becomes operational reality. Alignment is not a document created once and stored away. It is a continuing effort to keep protection tied to the current operating environment, which means listening, reviewing, and adapting as the organization itself changes. One misconception worth leaving behind is the idea that alignment means security should always compromise in favor of convenience. That is not alignment. That is drift. Real alignment does not erase boundaries or eliminate difficult decisions. Sometimes security leaders must say that a proposed shortcut creates too much exposure for a critical process or too much legal, operational, or reputational risk for the organization to accept casually. The difference is that this judgment is explained in business terms and tied to real consequences, not delivered as a disconnected rule. Alignment can include firm limits when the stakes justify them, because supporting operational objectives also means protecting the conditions required for those objectives to continue. If a business wants dependable service, trusted data, and predictable operations, then some controls must remain strong even when they create friction. Mature alignment is therefore not permissive. It is balanced. It tries to preserve business effectiveness while ensuring that convenience does not quietly undermine the very outcomes the business depends on most. Cross-functional trust becomes one of the strongest enablers of alignment over time. When operational teams believe security understands their pressures and respects their goals, they are more willing to share concerns early, ask for input, and support changes that may initially feel inconvenient. When security teams believe operational leaders will speak honestly about constraints and not hide issues until they become urgent, collaboration improves on both sides. This kind of trust is built through repeated experience. It grows when security recommendations are practical, when operational concerns are taken seriously, when reporting is honest, and when success is shared rather than claimed by one function alone. Trust does not remove the need for governance or formal accountability, but it makes those structures work better because people enter the conversation with less defensiveness and more willingness to solve problems together. In a mature organization, alignment feels less like negotiation between rivals and more like coordinated management around shared business outcomes and shared exposure to risk. As we close, the central lesson is that aligning security programs with operational business objectives is about making protection meaningful in the real life of the organization. A security program is strongest when it understands what the business is trying to achieve each day, where disruption would hurt most, and how safeguards can support continuity, trust, and resilience without ignoring operational reality. That requires business understanding, risk-based judgment, early involvement, clear communication, workable controls, sound governance, useful reporting, and a willingness to keep adapting as operations evolve. It also requires the discipline to recognize that alignment does not mean surrendering security principles for convenience, but rather applying those principles in a way that genuinely supports how the organization succeeds. For a new learner, this topic reveals a very important truth about CISM thinking. Security management is not just about defending technology. It is about helping the business operate safely and effectively so that protection becomes part of performance instead of something standing outside it.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.